The high-tech, immersive experience, Project Railway Guerrilla, puts you in a smoke-filled battlefild where you can follow the railway guerrillas to seize trains and blow up bridges, returning to the warriors when people were passionate about serving their country.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
This is actually truly terrifying.
This is actually the flagship dark ride at the Fantawild Glorious Orient theme parks throughout mainland China. But it's one of those things. You go for the custom Vekoma launch coaster, but you stay for the Sino-Japanese War-themed dark rides. In fact, speaking of these Vekoma launch coasters, the Fantawild Glorious Orient parks actually have a unique custom contracted roller coaster layout from Vekoma, the Vekoma Top Gun, designed specifically for their Glorious Orient parks. There's 6 of them that have been contracted, 4 of them have been built in the 4 operating Glorious Orient parks, and they are fantastic little rides. I'd be curious to know if they have an exclusivity contract on this ride layout, or if by this point in the game it's a free-for-all, because I would love to see one of these built in the United States.
Yeah, the fact that Vekoma has that model laying around in their social media profiles, on their website potentially, I don't know if they are marketing it for still or just showing like, hey, this is what we did. Because the Fantawild parks have all kinds of Vekoma models, like the Renegade, which is a model that's found at the Taizhou Fantawild complex, which is located not actually far from this project that we're talking about today.
Like an hour train ride from Ningbo.
And then they also
like
have
Wildcat.
They have this
Summerland.
What's that Celestial Gauntlet?
Celestial Gauntlet at the Fantawild Dreamland parks.
So there's definitely some models out there. So I wonder if Top Gun was by far maybe along with the Renegade specifically designed for Fantawild. But I'm wondering if anyone else could buy one if they wanted one.
I really hope that they can. Although I don't expect another park to create the vibe that this park has created for their rides. These are really like the centerpieces of the park.
And to be fair, they are designed to launch off the thematic aircraft carrier in the middle of a lake. The layout makes a lot of sense for what they're doing thematically. So I don't think it would work very well if you didn't have that theme tied into it.
It is like so well done. You enter the aircraft carrier, you launch off the side of it, you land on the aircraft carrier, you disembark, and you go to the cafe that's on launch level that features Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
Right next to the launch. Yeah, it's cool. That's very cool. It's like a whole. You can walk around the launch, like on the actual flight deck. You can walk around. So it's quite cool.
You can enjoy
launch deck or whatever
the launch from like a few inches away, just separated by a pane of glass while eating your ice cream.
Yeah, that's cool. Alright, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. Today's episode is all about what we kind of already introduced, Fantawild Ningbo. And Fantawild is a large conglomerate in China that is, I call it like a giant regional conglomerate in China, but their parks are kind of destination-y. Like the Ningbo park that we're talking about, resort that we're talking about today, is home to 3 theme parks. You have the Bunny Bears theme park, you have Fantawild
Oriental
Heritage, and you have Fantawild Glorious Orient, which sounds confusing, and
it's a little,
we'll explain it into more detail, of course. This is located in Xixi, which is technically part of Ningbo, but it's quite close to Shanghai.
North,
So it is right across the Hangzhou Strait, which is a giant, almost like bay, separating Shanghai from the southern province below it, which is Zhejiang. And so if you are ever in Shanghai and you're like, hey, I want to do that, you can easily do it by the bridge if you want to use Didi it. It's going to cost you not as much because it's not America, but it's going to be like an hour and a half drive from Shanghai.
Yeah.
Or you can just go if you're staying in Ningbo, which has enough to do on its own. It's also like an hour drive from Ningbo, from the city center. So it's kind of in the middle.
Cheaper to Didi from a hotel in Ningbo.
But you have to go to Ningbo first.
And if
you take a train, you have to go around the bay. So it still takes like 2 hours to get there by train. Which is like really cool.
But
it's very cool, yeah. You go through Hangzhou.
If you're trying to do all of this from Shanghai, budget more time for the taxi, because it could be upwards. It could, easily be like 2 hours round trip, and
one way,
very expensive, or 2 hours each way.
Yeah.
4 hours round trip, and it'll be a lot more expensive because of tolls for crossing the
Hangzhou Bay Bridge.
Bridge.
So one thing about this resort is that Again, I call it regional because there are several of them, and Fantawild is like a big conglomerate. But really, the resort setup is quite international. You would kind of compare it with like Universal Studios or like Universal Orlando Resort, where there's resort hotels, there's 3 theme parks, and the staff, there's like a whole complex of apartment that is like staff quarters. I'm talking like Chinese level high rises, so like quite large. So it is quite the setup, and I was quite impressed with it. For Chinese standards, I think it's definitely above average for quality. And when it comes to their dark ride collection, we're talking about probably the best dark rides company because they do everything in house, which is really cool.
It's all self-contained. It's like their Imagineering. It's like Fantawild designs, fulfills, constructs, and operates.
In fact, they are at IAPA every year. You can actually buy some of the dark rides or even their parks, or they highlight their portfolio. So I think outside of Disney Imagineering or Universal Creative, Fantawild has really shown to us that they are maybe even next in line globally. Maybe after like Efteling. I mean, let me put Efteling and maybe Fantasia or Europa Park.
Europa Park. Yeah, some of the European
conglomerates
poles are really.
But the multi-park companies, like parks that would like clone their products. But just really what Fantawild is all about.
Really, these guys, because it's all in-house, they really are the only other like Universal or Disney type company setup. Because like even a great park like I guess Efteling does their stuff in-house.
Yeah, Efteling is completely in-house.
They still have to like a park like Fantasyland or Europa Park. I guess Europa Park does too because it's all Mac. But occasionally companies will go outside of their development team for fulfillment purposes, like for equipment and stuff. Like, I think Symbolica, like, didn't they get the
I mean, I'm sure there's a possibility that Fantawild uses outside stuff, too, because, like, if you look at their flat rides or roller coasters, those are all other parties.
Flat rides and roller coasters are other parties.
But they are designed in-house, and they are very high quality. So we'll talk about the Glorious Orient Park a little bit more next, but we're going to start off with talking about the original park at this gate, and that is the Fantawild Oriental Heritage. So before we will talk about the park itself, I want to just describe a little bit about Fantawild. So Fantawild, as a company, is almost like they introduce concept parks and they kind of clone the concept parks, and with slight deviations. There'll be like different rides maybe sometimes. But so the phase 1 of a Fantawild park was like old Happy Valley Park.
Yeah, Fantawild Adventure. Yeah, those parks were literally knockoffs of Happy Valley Shenzhen. All of the first generation Fantawild parks had a fake Vekoma invert and a fake Vekoma mine train that was literally about emulating the Shenzhen project, which, you know, that like, if you've ever wondered why there's so many knockoff Vekoma mine trains with the 2 lift hills or the Vekoma like Kumali invert layout.
Because the true first regional park in China was the Shenzhen Happy Valley by OCT. And
it dates all the way back to 1998.
And you think in America, like, well, that's quite recent. But for the Chinese market, that's actually almost at the beginning of the regional market. Like, it boomed so much in recent years, but that was really the beginning. It's not long ago. And so Fantawild, with its original Fantawild Adventure Parks, was really just kind of, there was not much to copy. There wasn't much to get inspiration from, except for from the Shenzhen Happy Valley project. But then they moved into the second concept, and that was the Fantawild Dreamland concept. Yes. So that's the second phase of parks. And we went to one of them on this trip, and we'll talk about a different episode. But that was a little bit more with like a big castle entrance. Almost kind of imagine like that fantasy edge. But then it had more standard rides, like a boomerang, or like just like a wooden roller coaster, or you know, like a Mauer Sky Loop. Like it wasn't spectacular,
but a little bit more articulate in like what they wanted for each park to set itself apart from maybe other parks.
And they introduced dark rides.
And they started dabbling in dark rides. We'll talk about the great dark ride that we rode at the Fantawild Dreamland in Xiamen. Which you can tell, like, it's a little hokey, but man, you could tell that they were on the cusp of greatness with, like, the ambition that they had with this particular ride for this era of
And that's when they really started messing with theming, too. The Dreamlands are home to, like, a really beautiful water ride. We actually posted a reel of that already on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah,
this massive shoot-to-shoot that are, like, out of Atlantis-y themed.
Spectacular.
Very, very beautiful. Anyways, that was phase 2 of the theme parks. Then they entered phase 3 of the theme parks, and that was the Oriental Heritage phase. And Oriental Heritage is all about the myths and the history and the culture of China, and that is then the whole theme of the park.
Fantastical history, legends, and folklore.
And that's when dark rides started running wild.
Rides.
Shows, dark rides. This is when it became almost like... This is when it kind of started entering Universal territory.
Yeah.
I would say quality-wise. And we'll discuss that more in a little bit because that's the first part we're going to talk about.
And
then
also doing lots of shows and things.
Exactly.
Lots of thematic storytelling
and all very like unique because it's all very cultural. Like it's all about like legends and myths and very Chinese. And then, but like old China, you know, like Imperial China.
Yeah.
And then we introduced the
Stage
fourth
4.
phase, and that is the Glorious Orient Park, and which is really esteemed to Chinese wartime. It's all war themed. It's showing off China's efforts during the mostly Sino-Japanese War, if I'm not mistaken. And then it also shows like modern day China's strengths, and that's what the park is all about. So let's kind of dive into the attractions of Glorious Orient later, but this resort is home to those 2 later phases parks. So I think it's like kind of the most modern resort.
And I guess Boonie Bears is sort of like the 5th phase.
Yeah.
Boonie Bears are these anthropomorphic bear characters that are like really for kids. And the Oriental Heritage Parks and the Fantawild, like the Dreamland Parks and stuff, have all kind of started to incorporate these Boonie Bear characters as the mascots for their kids' areas. And the Boonie Bears have been so successful that now they're doing whole like indoor kiddie parks.
Which is funny. I think like but now stage 5 is almost a custom park stage because now they have that custom Fantawild land in Taizhou. They have the Fantawild Dinosaur Kingdom, which is like the most successful product that they've ever done. And then they have the Boonie Bear lands. I feel like at this point now we're starting to enter the phase where like the concept park was built, but now they're also building a bunch of custom parks. So it's kind of exciting to see where it goes next. But anyway, so phase 3 and 4, Oriental Heritage and Glorious Orient are what's at this resort, along with the Boonie Bears, so maybe even a phase 5.
We didn't go to Boonie Bears because they don't have a roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, there was not enough time to go to Boonie Bears.
According to Roller Coaster Database, one of the Boonie Bears parks allegedly has a coaster. But like like at Glorious Orient, we couldn't even ride the Vekoma family boomerang. They said that we were too big and too tall. Well, just too big. The height was actually not an issue on that one.
Or we were too heavy, but 77 kilograms is like nothing.
We were like substantially too heavy, according to them, to ride the family Vekoma boomerang, so...
And so my favorite thing about this whole chain is that their website has the coolest descriptions for the ride. Sometimes overselling it a bit because I prioritize based on the description.
It on some of them.
But we're going to go to Oriental Heritage first. And we're going to start with... What are we starting with? We're starting with the... it's kind of describing the park, I guess. So you enter Oriental Heritage, and it's like a beautiful Chinese town.
So yeah, it's sort of like... It's an imperial, somewhat fictionalized version of like historic Chinese landmarks and gardens and things. You walk in, and I guess we found from our experience at the Xiamen setup that like even though there's a lot of Glorious Orient parks that are stamped out, even the entrance plazas and stuff, and like some of the architectural choices are
like regional.
Yeah, regionally, they take regional thematics into consideration, which makes sense the more that you go to these parks and explore them. The centerpiece for these parks is like this really tall temple,
like pagoda
type building, and it looks very, it's really pretty looking. It seems very matter of fact, and then you find out that they have a drop ride inside of the temple. Both of the Glorious Oriental Heritage parks we went to.
Which is funny because even those temple towers, the pagodas, are actually thematically accurate with the architecture of the local style, because it's all like old China. So like different regions of China have very different architecture, and so that was actually kind of enjoyable to see that between the two parks we went to that were the same theme.
We made a point of riding this drop tower because it's like a Nanfang Amusements drop tower, which we've never ridden anything from them, and also just because it seemed like it would be really cool. The queue and the approach and stuff was promising, but actually riding it was kind of hokey.
I mean, on their website, they had this video of the ride. I mean, I will say, like, Fantawild's website is super Western friendly, and they have so much media and information and high limits and whatnot. And so on the video, it showed, like, you going up, and there's, like, all these scenery and theming, and then the windows open, and you look out over all of, the park, and then you drop. But the windows never opened, the scenery never seen, and it was just kind of like, all right, this is kind of either not maintained or
the Oriental Heritage, some of the indoor rides are... It's hit or miss. This ride, and then like to segue into the Mine Train, which is an indoor version of the standard knockoff version of the Vekoma 2-lift Mine Train. It was very Party City.
Yeah, so it's called Night Rescue, and then the description on the website was freaking awesome.
Oh yeah,
it said, "Is this the one, right?" Yeah. The description of the website is: travel through the underworld, climb the Nahi Bridge, experience icicles and magma, climb mountains of swords, and descend into seas of fire. Adapt from the folk legend, Mulian saves his mother. Thrilling and exciting checkpoints, the perfect combination of sound and light and movies, and surreal stunt scenery. Take a ride on track-type indoor roller coaster and experience extreme speed of speeding and the dark power of the netherworld.
Extreme speed of speeding.
In one weird and thrilling scene after another, follow Mulian to hell and to rescue his mother, feel the shocking experience brought by 3D movies and fog screen movies, and undergo rapid and thrilling soul baptism.
It's the soul baptism for me.
But we never got our soul baptized, and we also definitely didn't do any of the other things.
It was definitely more like Party City baptism.
And it was like a giant ghost in the dark with like very, very little theming.
Yeah.
I never saw no icicles or magma.
Yeah,
I never went to hell. I never saw anything 3D. There was no surreal stunt scenery.
Plastic skeletons and pipe cleaner spiders. Just goofy. I mean, it ran really well. The coaster in and of itself is what ran great because, you know, it's not subject to the elements. But aside from it being like a very forceful version of this ride, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything special. It certainly did not live up to the promises made by the Fantawild app.
Yeah, I mean, I had it like as my number one ride there. I was like, well, I can get a ride a boomerang anywhere. I can ride a Woody anywhere, but I cannot ride this indoor mine train with all this teaming anywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
and the drop tower was sort of in the same vein.
Yeah.
It had a SNS combo tower style ride program, but it was like really gentle. And it was, you know, just brought you up into like these little, like inside of the tower, but there's like, you know, cheap strings of LED lights and glittery.
It felt
Halloween
a little bit more like a
and
Chinese
stuff.
park in some parts of this park. Not all parts of the park. Some stuff was really impressive, but that felt a little bit more.
We went to Glorious
typical.
Orient first because the Top Gun was our priority. So when we came over to Oriental Heritage, it felt like you could see exactly how they had progressed in the way that they developed these parks by like seeing these two side by side.
And because this was the first park at the resort, they kind of had to also fill a little of the Dreamland.
Yeah, the Dreamland boxes are all kind of checked.
Because
at
if you go
this Oriental
to the Oriental Heritage parks or the other resorts that are the second gate, then the focus is purely on the Oriental Heritage thing. It's not, like, you know, so
yeah.
But here it was like, all right, so there also was a loop with a Jungle Trailblazer and a Polar Express. So that kind of made it feel like, all right, there's definitely some hints of a regular Dreamland park because it was the first gate. They couldn't just do all the special stuff.
It's a big park. Like the Oriental Heritage in Xiamen was a lot smaller, but it was also a lot tighter, and everything that was there was like a really nice version of the standard Oriental Heritage stuff. Whereas for Ningbo, it was like one loop was like the Oriental Heritage Park that Xiamen has, and then there was another loop that was sort of just like the amusement park loop that was based on like the Dreamland
standard
parks.
rides and a lot of theming,
just like coasters and rides scattered around and nothing too crazy.
So let's go ahead and talk about roller coasters for a bit. So the first thing we rode was the after the mine train.
We did Stress Express, right?
Which they also call Polar Express.
Polar Express.
But it's more themed to stress.
Yeah.
Stress Express, it was a good boomerang. I mean, it uses...
I have the description
on
this one. Extremely challenging super roller coaster, Polar Express, simulates fighter jet stunts, flipping upside down, spiraling, and unexpected backwards falls and rapid dives, challenging the weightlessness and acceleration limits of the human body. Only the true brave can experience such speed and passion.
Well, the passion.
It was the passion.
It's the passion for me.
It was the passion.
So, a passionate ride, it sure was, because we love Vekoma, but really it was just a boomerang.
It was a very, just shooting it straight.
Vekoma
boomerang.
The queue had no theming. It was nicely covered and vegetated,
yeah.
And then...
MK1212 trains.
Yeah, the track was the old Vekoma track, but like heavily reinforced. It ran fine.
Ran great.
Yeah, it was a good ride. It wasn't anything that special.
It was what it was.
It was what it was. It was a boomerang, but it wasn't paying for anything.
And then the next coaster we rode, which was really...
Oh, wait, but I did want to mention real quick, the Stress Express had these seatbelts.
Oh, yeah.
And then the hydraulic MK12 trains. It was so extra.
It's very typical of Chinese parks. We experienced this on like the Blue Fire clone at Yunnan Paradise as well. Seatbelts added underneath the hydraulic restraint seat molds, which... If I was on, like, a crummy Chinese coaster that was being poorly maintained, like, I'll take all of the seatbelts. I'll take them all. Like, whatever you're going to give me. But when it's, like, a hydraulic restraint on a really nice coaster that's really well maintained, it's just kind of annoying.
Did you have the description of the...
Oh, I sure do.
of the Woody.
So the next coaster we rode, which was my priority for this park, the Oriental Heritage Park, was the Gravity Group wooden coaster with a barrel roll.
So the description calls, it is the originator of roller coasters. It crosses the Pacific Ocean and originates from North America. Except for the base part, it is made entirely of wood. This huge wooden dragon, which is soaring and winding, makes collision sounds during operation. Rises and falls rapidly and experiences various twisting and turning tracks, giving an experience of speed and passion, and taking you on a whistling journey of swinging and shaking.
Lots of passion,
Lots of shaking, swinging, and most definitely makes collision sounds during operation.
Yeah. It was rough. It was fun, and I didn't feel like I came off the ride like in pain or anything. But man,
speak for yourself. No kidding. Yeah, it was very rough.
It was rough, but it was good.
And it did make collision sounds, like a lot of collision sounds.
It just sounds. But I feel like those gravity, the Timberliners definitely sound like some kind of thing being destroyed. They have this sort of tinkling, jingling, like explosion sound to them when they come running past.
So the cool thing about this park, or this ride, is that it has one of those corkscrews, which I think is definitely the highlight of the ride, and also maybe was even the smoothest part of the ride. So I think the layout is actually quite good. It doesn't run very well, but the layout is quite nice, and has that giant corkscrew, which is cool.
We bought the
Express
Pass for this, and I'm glad we did, because this is the way in which Fantawild parks are like extremely Chinese, aside from like obviously the source material of the theming, is just like operations and the way that people are just camped out in the queue houses but on little benches that are built in.
Yeah.
Because there's so much sitting and waiting in between dispatches.
Like, the operation wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great, you know? Like, it wasn't as bad as some stuff we've seen, but it also wasn't like Disney or Universal.
Some parks, the dispatches had lots of gaps in between because they're waiting for guests. Whereas the Fantawild parks, like, the guests are there, they're waiting. It was like a 90-minute wait for Jungle Trailblazer, but with the Express Pass, we just walked right on. And we walked past the queue house. We were like, I wonder if they're inflating the queue times. Like, I wonder if it's really 90 minutes. And we walked past all the people sitting, camped out in this, like, decrepit-looking queue house with, like, big swamp fans and stuff. And we were like, oh, yeah, I'm glad glad it was a good investment. If you go to any of these Fantawild parks, definitely don't hesitate to buy the Express Pass.
It's very easy. Just download their app or go to their mini app on Alipay. Like, it's all pretty doable.
Yeah. Once we got the hang of it, we were Express Passing our way around town. Like, we were just,
because they were cheap. It was like $4 a ride or something.
4 or 5.
At Heritage. Yeah. It was more expensive at Orient.
The Boomerang was like $3. It was like $3. Take that for what you will.
And then we went on to one of their signature dark rides, which has been cloned in several of the Oriental Heritage Parks, and that is called Nuwa Patches the Sky, which is a 3D ride a la Spider-Man, but very high quality, actually.
Yeah. In fact, what it reminded me of the most now was the Peter Pan ride at Fantasy Springs at Tokyo Disney Sea, because it's all LED screens.
Yeah, and it blends with the scenes quite well. Worked very well.
They did a fabulous job.
Very strong. Has a bit of pacing issues, but I think most Chinese dark rides kind of struggle with spending too much time.
They love their slow motion scenes. It's you can tell it was very much inspired by Transformers and like that ride's reliance on like kind of melodramatic, thematic drama kind of stuff. But yeah, that was a fabulous ride. And
I still quite can't remember what the exact story was, but one of Nuwa is, I guess, like a goddess, right?
This stone that we're protecting. It's like this magical rainbow stone, and then two different demigods try to steal the stone from Nuwa. One collects it, and then is subdued by the other, and the two of them are like attacking each other, and we're trying to chase after both of them and get the stone back. And
it is based on like a really famous classic story that's like 1,000 years old. That is like Chinese heritage, literally.
It was a great ride.
Yeah, it was very cool.
We didn't have enough time to ride it again on that visit, but luckily, because it's an Oriental Heritage Park, when we went to the one in Xiamen, we got to ride it a second time, and I liked it even better.
And the funnest part was the music at the end was like totally How to Train Your Dragon score.
How to Train Your Dragon music. That was pretty funny. Another dark ride that we rode at both of the Oriental Heritage Parks is it's a cute little boat ride, a Small World-esque ride.
It's called Colorful Kingdom.
And this kind of ride really, like, it wears its influence on its sleeve. It would nobody who worked on this ride would ever try to say that this wasn't a blatant ripoff of Small World, but Also, to call it a ripoff doesn't even give
Well,
it the justice.
they
did
do
a
it
nice
well
job.
enough. Like, it's very inspired by Small World. It is like a puppet ride with these kind of like 2D sets.
Yeah.
Kind of like Small World, really. But it's all themed to China exclusively in Chinese regions and Chinese cultures and heritage. So there's a bunch of different regions in China. They'll have different wear and different dances. And then the musical score is really good.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot sing it, but it's very good.
Earworm. And so in ways like the quality of the dolls and the scenes and the way that the ride has so much to offer. It's a huge ride. It's longer than any of the Small World rides. And it has that great little song. It really lives up to the expectations set by the Small World rides. Like, I would take this over Magic Kingdom Small World any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Great little ride. It's another one that we rode again at the Xiamen Park, just because we had a little more time on that day in Xiamen, and I was happy to relive the Colorful Kingdom experience again.
And then another really cool attraction, which is kind of touted as like a show on the boat, which I guess is not completely incorrect. This was quite impressive. This is the Battle for Jinshang Temple. And this is like a multimodal attraction. So how it works is first there's times of the day that it happens, like once an hour. So you show up to the ride, and then first you have the queue, right? Then you go through a beautiful walkthrough, and
amazing.
Then you get to a port, and you all board this massive boat. The boat holds probably like 100, 200 people.
Yeah,
like it's a massive
barge.
And then this barge goes through this Chinese village, and it takes like a good 20 minutes to like sail through this village. It's not very fast, but meanwhile, the story unfolds where it's like this white snake lady becomes a white snake and like
mommy.
attacks a bunch of stuff, and it's heading to Jinshan Temple. And we're also headed to Jinshan Temple. And so when we get to Jinshan Temple, we disembark from this boat. So this boat ride is quite large, so there's massive, like massive show building, and then you disembark like in the show building, and then you enter the Jinshan Temple. When you get into the temple, the story continues. You all stand there, like lining up in the temple, and then the lights turn off, and then this giant water screen happens, and there's like a fire effects, and then there's
like
projection mapping, and there's actors. That was quite cool.
This ride was doing the like Rise of the Resistance thing before Rise of the Resistance did, because the boat ride takes you, like, you disembark from somewhere other than where you started, and like when you leave the ride, you're still like in the middle of the attraction, except instead of continuing to a second ride, you continue to this show. And the show is really cool, and it reminded me of like old school Universal Studios kinds of attractions. The stage setup and like how you stand on like these stand-up bleachers was very reminiscent to me of Twister. And then watching the show unfold with the special effects stage and like lots of water effects and stuff was very like reminiscent of like the special effects shows and like Backdraft and Earthquake. Like, it was great. I was so impressed with it, and it made me very nostalgic because it's just not the kind of attraction that Universal is building these days, but definitely brought me back to like 90s Universal Studios Florida vibes.
And all of it felt, I mean, everything in this park, because there's also even stuff we didn't get to do at this park, we did at the other Oriental Heritage Park, but everything there is definitely like made for mass attendance. It is pretty high quality. It's made for good throughput. I think it was like a nice indicator of what was yet to come for the next phase. Of course, we actually visited this park second, but overall, I think it's still a pretty impressive park. It wasn't my favorite of the two parks, of course, but stuff like Battle for Jinshan Temple, New Apache the Sky, that's all really cool. And before we move on to the next park, they actually had a Kuka Arm style, Forbidden Journey style dark ride where you fight the monkey god at the volcano, which is like Fire Mountain or like Burning Mountains, whatever it is in Chinese. But unfortunately, that ride has closed across all Fantawild.
They had built
Oriental
6
Heritage.
of these Kuka Arm rides at all of the Oriental Heritage parks, but I guess sometime in the last 12 months, they ended up taking the loss on all of them. From the reviews that we read, the few reviews that are out there, they said it was good, but like had major capacity issues. Even some of the rides at the Glorious Orient Park, the newer dark rides, had some capacity issues, so it doesn't surprise me. And then just like on the fulfillment side, it had like screen carousels in the same vein of Forbidden Journey, but then like the vehicles didn't fit all the way in the carousel, so like you could see the edge of the carousels, and like it was just a rough around the edge sightline type attraction, but very ambitious. A lot of the reviews that I read were just had a lot of praise to offer just for the sheer audacity of trying to do a ride like this even if the execution and the overall experience wasn't as good as like Noah Patches the Sky, which is perfect. Like that ride.
Yeah, that's a really, really
ride.
beautiful ride. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about it probably a little bit more in the Shaman episode because Shaman has a little less to talk about. So stay tuned for our Fantawild Shaman experience, and there we'll dive more into New Patches of the Sky. But because this episode is going to focus a little bit more on the Glorious Orient Park, which is one of the most spectacular theme parks in China, in my opinion, we're going to switch focus to that park.
Yeah. Also, it was the only Glorious Orient Park we went to on this trip, whereas we went to 2 Oriental Heritages. So we'll talk more about Oriental Heritage on our Shaman episode, where we'll also be talking about the Fantawild Dreamland Park Shaman. So Glorious Orient definitely feels like the natural evolution of the Oriental Heritage Park in terms of like scope and execution. Everything feels like it is of a similar quality and an overall higher quality. We rode all 3 of the e-ticket dark rides and the Flying Theater, which was quite good. And then, of course, the Vekoma Top Gun, which was just an exquisite ride. They have 4 coasters total. The other 3 are all family coasters. And of those 3 family coasters, we were granted entry to 0 of them.
Yeah, but luckily that really wasn't a priority.
Yeah, it's a little annoying getting told that you were like 20 kilos too heavy to ride a Vekoma family boomerang. It's like, come on.
Heavy,
but, you know, it is what it is. This actually happened to us when we were at Happy Valley in Nanjing when we tried
Same
to
model,
ride
too.
the rebound layout of the Vekoma family boomerang. So it didn't even feel like a Fantawild thing. It was like something is amiss with the way the Chinese are interpreting safety rules on this particular layout of the Vekoma family boomerang, because when we rode a different layout of one,
in Chongqing,
the Ben 10 layout in Chongqing, that was fine.
Yeah.
It was totally fine. So
I think we should start with the dark rides.
Yeah.
And then we'll finish with the Vekoma Top Gun.
Yeah.
So let's just start with the dark ride. The dark ride.
You want to start with
the darkest of dark rides.
You want to start with that one? That's intense. Okay.
It's very intense.
Trial
We
by fire.
gotta keep the people interested.
Yeah, all right. Let's go.
All right,
Let's
so
go.
remember when I started at the beginning of the episode and I said this
You
thing?
should read it again. I want an encore performance of this description.
Maybe I practice now. The high-tech immersive experience project, Railway Guerrilla, puts you in a smoke-filled battlefield where you can follow the railway guerrillas to seize trains and blow up bridges, returning to the warriors when people were passionate about serving their country. And they weren't kidding. They were not kidding.
We're definitely passion. You know, we had some passion over on Stress Express. And
but that was like nowhere near the passion of this passion.
This is even more passionate.
Like the passion.
This is very passionate.
So to give you a little bit of context, we knew about this ride, and I had some German friends visit a while ago, and they mentioned something about the themes of the dark rides being very like war focused. But you know, the whole theme of the park is kind of war focused, so I wasn't really sure what to even expect from that. So then we rode the Top Gun a couple times, and then right next to it was actually what they call Railroad Warriors on the English sign, but they call it
Guerrilla
Railway somewhere else. So the names, of course, are
There's
all
like
over the
3 different names for all of these rides.
So we went over there and I said, well, this is, I think, one of the dark rides. Let's do it. But I wasn't quite sure what the dark ride was, because when we looked at photos online, I wasn't sure if it was like a static train we were on. Like it was kind of confusing.
It kind of looked like a dynamic attractions, like tram ride type ride in the vein of like King Kong at Islands of Adventure, but it was because it just wasn't clear.
Yeah, it was just like a singular photo, and this description I just listed
so
for you.
We walked up to the ride vehicles, and they were these 15-passenger style, like Spider-Man style vehicles, but with machine guns.
I guess you should start calling them like Transformer style, because Spider-Man, when people think of Disney, is the wrong ride.
I guess that's true.
Like,
but Spider-Man was first. It'll always be Spider-Man
so
style.
Like Transformer style vehicles, and then they have these like loaded machine guns that are attached to each seat, and then we're like, all right, what's
little arcade buttons on the front.
We're like what's happening? You know, I was like, oh, but you know, this could be fun. But then we roll into the first scene. We were
by ourselves.
We were completely by ourselves. It was early in the day. It was like half hour after.
We walked right on. They were waiting for riders.
So we get in and we're sitting in this vehicle. This picture's pretty much right away. And so you first roll into this kind of like a warehouse, this hangar, and this like Chinese sergeant is telling you like, all right, we're going to be, we're going to be doing target practice. So you start with a target practice, and everything seems still kind of like, okay, like it's not, like whatever.
It's not a shooting dark ride in the sense that you keep score, but it is a shooting dark ride in the sense
it's interactive.
That it's interactive, and when you shoot a screen, like the bullets show up in accordance.
Like projection maps.
With how you, So
but anyway, before we get there...
Cool.
We do a practice run. And you can see like this Japanese, like, like the old sun Japanese flag.
Sun flag.
And then there's a bunch of these like fake soldier wooden cutouts, and you shoot at them, right? And they all fall over, and they're like, and then you turn back. The vehicle turns back to the sergeant, and the sergeant's like, "Alright, you ready?" Right? So we're like, "All right, what's going on?
Am I ready?
Am I ready?"
There's no
we're like, this is weird.
You can
know?
never really be ready for guerrilla warfare.
Like, this is wild. So anyway, then we leave the hangar, the doors swing open, and the first thing you see is these spotlights, and like the alarms are going off, and it's like machine gun sounds everywhere, and it's like very heavy and very dark.
We've infiltrated a Japanese base camp with like their train and stuff.
Yeah, which we're about to seize. So anyway, speaking of alarms, there's a fire truck driving by.
Outside, providing some 4D enhancement of our.
So then, like, you're in this encampment, right? And on the railroad, there's like a sergeant. He's like pointing at where to shoot, whatever. So then, like, you face like all these, I guess, Japanese soldiers, and you shoot them all to pieces. And like while you press the buttons, like there's a bunch of projection mapping showing up, quite quality, actually, quite high detail of all these bullets, right? And everyone dies, whatever.
It's very dark.
Very
graphic.
You're like, oh my god, but it's so loud in there. But it's also all insane. A physical set.
I was so unprepared for the graphic nature of this because it's a ride. I would never think like, oh, a ride. You know, dark rides can be scary and intense, but I'm not expecting like death and bloodshed of,
and
like,
we didn't know
humans. And
we
stuff.
didn't know what to
So
expect.
crazy.
So then, like, there's this big train. You go around the train and you shoot a bunch more people and a bunch more people and a bunch more people, right? So then eventually you leave the base camp and then you pass another train and you go into this dark tunnel. And in the end of the dark tunnel, you, if I'm not mistaken, this is the right order of operations. You then like have a screen scene where like you actually are like chasing by one of the trains, right? And we're trying to catch up the train and whatnot. And then we then fall or something, and then we get stuck in a cornfield, and we know in the cornfield something's about to happen because we're already.
The corn stalks are really high, and we're like lost. And we come around a corner,
and of course a tank comes through the corn and shoots at you, and you're so like, scary. "Oh my god, it's so scary." It is all very dark, and the ride is mostly physical sets. So like, and then the music, the noise, it was like so intense and so scary. It was like I was like, I'm not ready for war. I cannot be enlisted for war.
I'm not built.
Like I'm not made for this. Super scary. So then eventually there's another scene where like we again follow down the train and try and blow it up, and then we jump into the train.
There's like another Humvee next to us. We're like in the gutter, and then the Humvee next to us like tries to like drive into the train car, but then it like crashes and like
people die.
The driver like gets flung out of the car, and one of our troops that's already infiltrated the train like grabs him and pulls him up into the train. And then we like use this edge of the gutter to like as a ramp, and we fly up in our Humvee and into the train car and are shooting the Japanese.
And then we're throwing these grenades into the train, and then we get out of the train right before the bridge.
Yeah, it blows up.
And the train starts exploding. And then the bridge starts exploding with the train on it, and then we fall. This is a cool effect. It moves you through these screens backwards while angling you up. And so, like, it looks like we're falling, like, down the ravine while the bridge above us is exploding, the trains are exploding, everything's exploding, and then we crash, and then this physical bridge, like a physical thematic element, like, crashes as well. And then we turn a corner, and the crashed train is there, like, all physical sets, right?
There's, like, a piece of the locomotive that is, like, coming right for us, and the trellis of the bridge, like, catches it, and it's a screen that has the locomotive on it, but the bridge piece is physical, and it like cracks in half as it catches it right before it hits your car. It's really amazing.
And then when you turn the corner, the crashed train is there, and then like
your comrades,
the Chinese
survived.
war heroes are all sitting there, you know, singing and celebrating, and they're playing this like kind of like very military chants, and then you get to the station where there's a bunch of photos of the like war heroes and stuff, and I feel like I even skipped some parts of the ride because it's all kind of a bit of a blur. We rode it twice, but it's so dark and so scary. I mean, when we rode it for the first time, we were just like screaming. We were like, what is even going on? And it's one of the most beautiful dark rides I have ever ridden, but it's so dark and it's so scary.
Just polished.
Oh my god.
To the nines.
I almost wish that I could do a better job describing this ride because I maybe cannot, but it was so freaking terrifying. Just the overall scope of it, the scenes are massive, everything was very detailed, the projection mapping of the bullets, all the people dying, the physical trains. There's like 3 or 4 major giant locomotive physical trains on the ride. You move between only a few screens, not even that many screens, and the screens themselves are very well blended.
A lot of the screens are woven into the physical props just so that they can recreate soldiers walking by that you're shooting.
Yeah, and it's like on all levels, and like a watchtower, and like, oh my god, it's like It's incredible. I would say it's on the scope of, like, size-wise, probably as big as, like, probably Spider-Man, right?
Easily, yeah.
But it's a lot darker, and it doesn't... Like, a Spider-Man, I feel like it's kind of a formulaic, right? Like, Spider-Man Islands of Adventure, where, you know, it's like one character in a scene, one character in a scene, one character in a scene. This ride, it really felt incredibly cohesive. It really did not feel like we're jumping from event to event. Like, it's one giant event dragged out. Yeah, I had a phenomenal time. But it was so scary. It was terrifying, dark ride. It was terrifying. I don't think I've ever been that scared, ever.
Yeah, definitely one of the best dark rides we've ever ridden. We're starting to see on our China travels, we see a lot more of the Spider-Man Transformers-esque style dark rides. A lot of the big high-budget parks have them, and they're always entertaining, for better or for worse. Like, sometimes they're fun just because they're kind of hokey. Like, the one at Dragon Valley Nanjing was, like, full of plagiarism and idea theft and stuff, but then there's some really good ones, like the final sea battle at Wuchi Sunak, which is like a ride of this style, but with like a Pirates of the Caribbean sort of theme. It was done really well, and this was definitely in that caliber of, like, it's not just good by a Chinese ride standard, it's just really good. Like,
yeah,
it's
like
extremely good globally. Like, looking at all dark rides, looking at Universal and Disney and Efteling and stuff, it is right up there.
In fact, I think it's one of my favorite dark rides you've ever done anywhere in the world. Like,
well, yeah,
it is dead high quality.
Free in my mind. We
like,
just
it was
talk about it all the time.
very impactful, and it lasted. Yeah, that was a good ride length, and it was just so high quality.
It was easily the best ride of the trip. And we
by
went
far,
there
yeah.
for the Vekoma Top Gun.
Yeah, I agree. So there's more dark rides here. There's another, again, all kind of war themed. Should we do Breakout next?
Let's give them a break. Let's do the boat one.
Okay, let's do the boat one. I'll have you read the description of the boat
that
one.
That isn't about, like, the only one that doesn't have to do with, like, active wars. Well, I guess it does. It's got some gunfire. It's got everything here. Like, all the e-ticket rides here. There's some active war zone situations going on here.
So Zijiwan is a Pirates Shanghai style ride, which is located in the back of the park, and it's a massive show building, and it's so freaking massive. It's hard to comprehend. I really thought it was going to be like Pirates-sized boats too, because that wasn't the case.
Yeah,
but it is like a very
smaller.
similar kind of ride, and it follows the construction, voyages, and sinking of the famed Chinese ship Zijiwan, which literally means "go for forever."
Yeah, the English translation of the ride's name is "Go Far and Far," and I think I was trying to like articulate the way, like, what they're trying to say by that, why that would be like a repetition of the name, and I think it's supposed to be like forever and ever, like into infinity kind of thing, basically, like go into like forever. I think that's the word that they're trying to, like, the description. Translations are always kind of rough, and it's like less about a direct, like, a literal translation and more about, like, trying to explain, like, the essence of what something is called or labeled. So the ship is, but the ride is technically called Go Far and Far, and it's all about, like, the construction of this ship with, like, lots of these physical props. You have, like, the shipyard in Great Britain where the ship was contracted and constructed, and then, like, you see its maiden voyage, and then it gets, you know, you follow it around. You're in China. There's some scenes that happen on the water's edge with, like, various props and stuff, and then you go to war, and the ship. And
this whole ride system is, again, very much like Shanghai Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean, where the water blends with screens. So, like, when you're on the open ocean, there's, like, ships going by, and you're in these ship battles, and there's, you know, explosions in the physical water that you're sailing in, and then beautiful in people's ears. And so that's kind of, I guess you have to know that part of the dark ride.
It is amazing. Like, it's hard to tell where the water begins and the screen ends. It does a really nice job.
Where the water ends, screen begins. Yeah. And then eventually, I guess, the demise of the ship, it crashes, or it gets blown to pieces and it sinks. And then
you sink with it.
Yeah, and so then the rest of the ride takes place underwater, thematically,
and you're,
which is like physical props and stuff.
Through the shipwreck. And then after you float through the shipwreck, you are resurrected by present-day scientists who are uncovering artifacts from the ship and, like, pieces of the hull and stuff. Very, like, Titanic style.
Yeah, like one of those cute little submarines.
Yeah.
And then eventually the ending of the ride is just a giant showcase of modern China's, like, warship fleet and, like, fighter jets. And when you're sitting in that scene, it's just, like, a never-ending, like, glorious showcase of like of a boat parade of all the giant, massive Chinese ships and Chinese warfare ships, whatever they call those things, which is very typical, I guess. It was kind of a weird ending. I was like, oh, okay, like the whole ride kind of follows the story of this one ship.
It seemed like it really seemed like of the 3 dark rides, like the focal point dark ride for the park, but it was definitely like our least favorite.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's by far the most impressive, even by approach. Like you show up and it's a giant ship sailing out of a hangar on this lake, and it's larger than life, and the show building is massive behind it. But then the ride itself, it was good, but it wasn't guerrilla warfare.
It did have
good.
broad appeal, though. You know, when we were at the park, there were a ton of tour groups with like really, really old people, and the other 2 dark rides are like so violent and aggressive. And then there's like roller coasters.
The line for this was the longest.
And we're like, what are these people gonna ride? But it's really this boat ride is the one that is actually like suitable for all ages. And still very impressive and kind of thrilling in its own way, but not as spectacular in our opinion or as thrilling as the other 2.
And then there's another dark ride, and this dark ride is called Mission Breakout.
Yeah.
And
no, it's just Breakout.
Mission Breakout. No, Hangar Breakout. It's Hangar Breakout.
The website just says Breakout.
But the ride entrance is Hangar Breakout.
Yeah, Hangar Breakout would be.
But I will say, all these rides are in these really beautifully themed areas, like these massive, highly detailed themed areas that then represent like an area or like a theme of that actual ride that's in the area. But I will say the areas are beautiful. Like the area that Hangar Breakout was in was gorgeous. The area that the ship was in was gorgeous. The giant theater was gorgeous. It was all very pretty. The park is very, very pretty. There's like an old Hong Kong there. Like I really thought it was an amazing park just by immersion. It was really cool.
The Flying Theater, was that technically in the same area as Railway Gorilla, or is it in the same area as this? The Hangar Breakout ride.
Gorilla.
Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't really. I guess it's kind of in like its own little corner because it's not. The Flying Theater, of course, just covers like a lot of Chinese landmarks and stuff. It was a really cool ride, very well done. Tonally a little different from the other dark rides. And stuff.
It really shows off like Chinese mega projects. So mega bridges, like the giant dams, the big power generating dam that's like at the bottom of the Yangtze, like all that kind of stuff was all highlighted in this ride. It was very much a look at like the mega projects of China to ride, really.
But anyway, so back to Hangar Breakout. The description of the ride is as follows. In the large-scale indoor track project Breakout, you will become a commando, go through the hail of bullets, go deep into the enemy camp, and participate in a thrilling and fierce battle.
Well, the bullet range situation, or hail of bullets, very true. Very exciting. The ride system itself is quite unique. So how it works is, unfortunately, this is a capacity nightmare, but how it works is you load 3 Spider-Man style vehicles or Transformer style vehicles.
Souped up ones too. They're
elevated. But they're not as big. They're only 2 rows instead of 3 rows.
They're kind of boxy, but there's like a lot more articulation. Like they raise up and down a lot more.
And so how it works is they load 3 at a time. And then as the ride starts, the 3 vehicles kind of follow each other, right? They're not, of course, like they go in one by one for each scene. But then the cool thing about this ride is that it uses the entire show building twice. So midway through the ride, you go through this corridor, everyone's shooting at you and stuff. But really, it's like lower curtains from the station, and there's like the scene inside the station that you go through, and then you do the entire ride again. Except for now, the screens display different videos. The ride vehicles show different sides of the physical sets. So it almost feels like a really, really long dark ride, where the story just progresses. But really, you're using the same track twice.
We were halfway through the second loop when we realized that it was the same track we had been through, but with different scenes
and facing different directions,
different props.
Yeah,
because like you'll have like a big prop of like a fighter, or like an aircraft, but it's like behind you in the shadows, obscured from view.
Yeah, I only slightly noticed it once, and the first time I was like, "Oh, are we supposed to see that?" I was really confused on why there was like this giant plane kind of hovering behind us and not lit up, and I was like, oh, that's weird. But then the second time around, of course, at the very end of the ride, that crashed airplane was there, and we were supposed to see it at the end of the ride.
There's definitely a way that they could do this ride in a more high capacity setting. It reminded me of like Dark Coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, where like you go through the whole ride twice, but instead of passing through the station, you do a little station bypass and it plugs you back into the track. This ride is literally just a single track, and you go through it twice, including the station. And I feel like you could do 2 sets of cars where one set is loading while the other set is going through the thing twice, and then they rotate.
So the theme itself, and again, it's kind of hard to remember all this, but the theme itself is that
sensory overload.
That we're leaving. You know, we're in the enemy camp. We are in this tank or like Humphrey or whatever it is, and then we are infiltrating the camp, and then eventually we're trying to stop a certain aircraft from taking off, but it's a lot of fighting and shooting at each other and just a never-ending war scene, and between physical sets and actual screens. And then eventually I think the finale really is that this plane is taking off and we are just trying to like blow it up, and I think at some point we get attached to it and then we fall back and the plane crashes, and then you see that giant physical plane prop at the end. Quite an impressive dark ride, really high quality. I would say about the same quality as Guerrilla Railway or Railroad Warriors, except for the difference is that Railroad Warriors was a much more physical dark ride, kind of, with physical sets, as where this one was, I think, a little more screen based. Would you agree?
Yeah. We liked it a lot, and it would have been nice to have had time to ride it a second time. It was one that would be worth riding again, unlike, the boat ride one didn't quite beg for re-examination.
But this one had the longest line, too.
But yeah, and really, I think the long line was related to the capacity. It's not a high capacity ride. If in the future, when we go to another Glorious Orient park, and they have this ride, we should go there first and get our ride in before.
The good news is all of them have the fighter jet, and all of them have Railroad
Guerrilla
Warriors, by far the two best rides in the park, in my opinion.
And I think all of them have the boat ride too, but not all of them have this airplane one.
Yeah, so at least we got the unique dark ride, and it was quite good. I will say again, the dark rides at this park are really impressive. And then last but not least, let's head over to the Vekoma launching coaster. Fighter Jet, in Chinese it's Eagle Striking the Sky, which is a custom Vekoma launch coaster. Model name is Top Gun. And it was contracted, like we mentioned earlier, exclusively for Fantawild's 6 Glorious Orient parks. And so far 4 have opened. Where are the other 2 supposed to be? Do you remember?
I have them here. If you go on Roller Coaster Database, you can look up the Vekoma Top Gun model page. This was actually, the one that we rode was the second one to open.
This was the one in Ningbo.
The one in Jiangxi was the first of the 4 currently operating
in Guangzhou?
Yeah. Oops. So yeah, that one opened in May of 2021. The one that we rode in Ningbo opened in July of 2021. In July of 2022, the third one opened in Huai'an in the Jiangsu province. And then the fourth one, the most recent one, actually opened less than a year ago. Even by the time this episode comes out, it'll be about a year. It's July 2024.
Oh, no, this is coming out in May. It's
less
almost,
than a year.
less than a year old, like 10 months old, yeah.
So then the most recent one, it's not even a year old, and that's in Jining in Shandong, which is a reasonable train ride south of Beijing. I think we're going to hit this park.
Yeah, we're actually planning on hitting some more Glorious Orient parks, because we actually had a really good time at Glorious Orient. So we want to do more of them, and the fighter jet coaster is so phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so amazing to go to a park like this and then realize that they cloned this park several times with slight differences. But
differences.
Essentially, cloning the park, and it's like a coaster this spectacular. You'd think would be like a one of a kind ride, but it's so amazing to know that we get to go to another park that has all these great rides, and we get to ride them all again. But this time it's a new park, so we technically get like a new credit, new dark ride credits, new coaster credit,
100%,
new region,
and we get
credit,
to ride
city credit.
the cool rides that we love so much again. So let's talk a little bit about the ride. Do you want to describe the ride layout a little bit to people?
So I think we're starting now that the United States is starting to dabble in these modern Vekomas. Really, it's funny, we're getting all the tilt coasters, and then like the only launch coaster of the current generation from Vekoma that we have is actually Six Flags Great Adventures Flash Vertical Velocity. But even that's quite different from the full circuit launch coasters, like the Vekoma Shockwave that you could find at
Energylandia
or Nanjing Dragon Valley, or even like the little Formula launch coaster that's also at Energylandia. This one, I think, the most unique quality of this ride, I think, is the 2 vehicle trains. They see 8 passengers. What this accomplishes for this ride is like very tight maneuvers and like very squarely sort of experiences, and like a really nice ride regardless of your seat. That's like pretty streamlined. Like your front seat ride and your back seat ride are all going to be equally strong, forceful, airtime laden. Whereas like when we rode the Shockwave in Nanjing, our front seat ride and our back seat rides definitely had a lot of unique traits because it's a 4-car train. And then even like the Flash is a 6-car train. So like it's the kind of thing where having a ride that has a long train will lead to things like different experiences in front and back and like drag. Like,
but here it really felt kind of the same, except for that first element.
This ride hauls ass the whole way through because it just does not slow down. It's such a lightweight little train. It just zips right through the whole thing. And the top hat is probably the greatest moment on this ride because it is such a wild moment. And it's like I don't even know how to describe the top hat.
So how I describe it, it's kind of like a non-inverting loop, except for, you know how like in a non-inverting loop you go up one direction and then you go down towards the other direction, like it's continuous roll. This thing rolls in the opposite direction. So you do almost like a 270-degree twist upward into the top hat. At no point actually inverting.
No, you do invert.
I guess you do
go
invert.
Upside down.
Yeah, I guess you do. Yeah,
you do like a full twist into a inversion. And then roll out of it on the top of it. Like,
yeah, I guess it's 360,
crazy.
but you're making a 9-degree turn at the same time.
Look this thing. Like, we posted some videos of it already, but so you got to look at this thing.
So by the time you're listening to this episode on our social media, you'll have videos and photos of this ride, and then the top hat will make a lot of sense. I would recommend looking that up. And then after the top hat, it's followed by... God, I have such a terrible time remembering all this stuff. Oh yeah, it's like a giant airtime hill that dives down to pretty much the lowest part of the ride, and then you have almost like an N% kind of swoop back up, followed by a downwards roll, which is like a 360 kind of like barrel roll.
Fast.
It's incredibly fast. It's very low on the ride, even though it's like only the second element after the inversion. And then it's followed by
it has that
kind of like the weird S turn. So it does like a weird S turn up. It's like an airtime S turn where like you switch directions really quick, almost like Maverick style.
Yeah.
You have a really forceful helix down, and you have quite a steep hill into the mid-course. After the mid-course, you roll through it quite quick. You turn sideways, and then you dive down into another barrel roll. And this barrel roll is not as fast as the first one, but it's still quite good. That's followed by an upward helix, followed by a couple airtime hills. One going down and like a full airtime hill, and then you slide into the final brakes.
I will say this is the only next-gen Vekoma right now, like of this style, that has a mid-course brake run, and the reason for that is just because the trains are so small.
Yeah, not like you can trust a Chinese park to actually dispatch them in time.
But... Although they were running 2 trains on this, I was impressed by. But it's like they wouldn't dispatch the second train until the first train had already returned to the station into the separate unload platform and emptied out. It actually made great for re-rides for us because they were kind enough to let us just exit from the exit station and walk right on to the second train in front of us that was waiting for riders. We got 3 front seat rides and 1 back seat ride. Later in the day, and I think I prefer the front row on this. I think just the visuals are just so great, but the back seat is, you can't lose. Just a fabulous ride. And that mid-course little bit, the ride is so intense that I don't even mind the little break.
Yeah, it's very intense. Like when we rode it twice in a row, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can even ride it a third time. Like,
it was
so intense.
Yeah, we rode it our 3rd time in a row just because we could, and we were like, oh, that was a lot. Like that was doing it 3 times without any break in between was a lot. This one is my favorite. I liked it even better than the Shockwave at Dragon Valley Nanjing, and I love that ride. I was so blown away by that ride. But that one's a little bit more conventional if you're familiar with the Abyssus layout.
That one's also a lot larger scale. The elements are much larger. This ride is quite compact. Mm-hmm. It does a lot for a small vehicle, but it's definitely like kind of like Spaghetti Bowl style. Like I got a couple of shots where it's just track, and you won't get that on the
hard.
Big Shockwaves.
It took a couple rides for me to anticipate what was going to happen next because it feels so unpredictable, even once you've already ridden it.
Yeah.
And just like the shape of the top hat, the focal point elements on this ride feel really unique and exclusive to this ride. Whereas like the Shockwave, it has the boomerang, which is of course a wonderful element. That's like a legacy move. That's like a classic. That's like an Aero classic move. You've got a vertical loop, a top hat that's like a 180 twist on the top hat, and then a vertical dive. Everything that this ride does feels unique to the ride.
And it flows so well. Just like any modern Vekoma, the flow is like so good.
To die for.
It's like revolutionarily flowy. So that's the thing to highlight. On paper maybe to highlight, but I think for me the impact was still the greatest on Real Road Warriors. That thing was just a piece of art, scary, dark ride. This is a really good roller coaster, but besides being a really good roller coaster, that was it. Like there was no good theme.
I guess I would say we went with extremely high expectations, and those expectations, as lofty as they were, I think were still exceeded. Maybe even met, but even exceeded, because I don't know. I didn't expect to like it more than Shockwave. I didn't expect to like it more than that because the Shockwave coaster is such a lush and terrain-oriented ride, and I'm a sucker for terrain rides. I just didn't think I would like it as much as I did, but I knew I would like it a lot. And so that ride, being blown away by that ride wasn't a surprise because we just love Vekoma, and we knew that it would be a 10 out of 10 top shelf experience, but we didn't know what we could expect from the dark rides. And it was really the boat dark ride that we had the highest expectations of. The other two dark rides, we were a little bit more confused, especially with the guerrilla warfare one, because we didn't even know what kind of ride system it was.
That one just surprised me the most. I think it left the longest memory for me, and I think that was really in fact, the whole highlight of the whole trip.
Really,
Well, of course, this trip was not just theme parks, but on the theme park side of the trip, it was still the biggest highlight for me.
The biggest pleasant surprise,
the most memorable moment
was that. Was that ride.
So, but overall, great park. We're at the hour mark, so we're going to, just past it. We're going to wrap it up here. But park is great. I would definitely recommend if you're going to Shanghai doing roller coasters, this is worth the trek. Not only because it's a great roller coaster you can find here, but it's also because the dark ride collection is. It's just something you're not going to ride anywhere else. You're not going to find this kind of dark ride anywhere.
This was our first set of Fantawild parks because they're the easiest Fantawild parks to access from major hub points. We've been to China many times, and we've been always meaning to do a Fantawild park, and the Ningbo setup with the three parks, the two major roller coaster parks, is a great place to start.
I think this is actually our third time planning on going, but the first time really succeeding. First time was kind of murky plans. Second time, we really had it on the schedule.
We got weathered out.
But there was a typhoon, so we were stuck in our hotel, so we could not go to the park. And then this time, we actually managed to go. So,
I am really glad that we did the 2 nights in Ningbo, though, because it's a full day, guys.
We opened close to it.
You can do both parks in one day, but it takes all day. And unless you really want to be sitting in a taxi for 4 hours on that park day, you're better off just doing a hotel 2 nights in Ningbo.
Or staying at the resort.
Stay at the resort. Great hotels at that resort. I would have loved to have stayed at the resort and, dicked around at the Booty Bear area.
But we're Marriott boys after all, so we need to use our... It was the Marriott promotion, so we had to do...
We're Marriott girls, so we had to stay at the flashy Marriott in Ningbo. But definitely I would assume that the Fantawild Resort Hotel experience is a positive one. So I wouldn't hesitate to consider that if you plan on visiting one of these great multi-park Fantawild resort complexes.
And this is our second episode of the season. So this is season 6. We just started it. Check out our last episode, the Epic Universe episode. That's the launch episode. The next episode, we're going to be talking about a European park. We're going to be talking about Europa Park and their 50th anniversary. And then we've got a bunch of cool episodes coming up. We're spacing out our China stuff a little bit this season. So the next China parks to be hit on this trip were Fantawild, Oriental Heritage, and Fantawild Dreamland in Xiamen, which will be a little bit later in the season. And we also visit one of the most gorgeous parks in all of China.
One of the most beautiful parks we've ever been to.
And one of the most beautiful regions of all of China.
Amazing.
Colorful Yunnan Paradise. And that will all be discussed later in the season. So stay tuned for that. If you want photos of this ride and more information, I guess mostly photos and videos of this ride, follow us on our social media, Instagram, Facebook, The Coaster Kings, or on thecoasterkings.com. We'll have a media player of this as well with some photos. Definitely check it out. Gorgeous ride. And we appreciate everyone for listening. Wherever you're listening, leave us a review, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.